shall not be, I shall not be moved. I shall not be, I shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. I shall not be moved. Jesus will not fail me. I shall not be moved. Jesus will not fail me. I shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. All right, all right, all right. Welcome to the Waycast. Glad to see each one of you here tonight. We are in Genesis chapter 25. This should finish us up in Genesis as we are finishing up our precepts upon precepts tomorrow night in the third part of Genesis. And this is the commentary that we are looking at. And so I have went back to Genesis and picked this up for you guys who are in the Bible study. And so we are, the theme for Genesis chapter 25 is Abraham marries Keturah. Abraham dies, Esau, and Jacob. This is another great chapter of the Bible. It records the death of Abraham and the birth of the twins, Esau and Jacob. Now, we're only supposed to go through 18 in the Bible study, but we're going to do the whole chapter tonight to include it to Isaac and Rebekah. It gives the generations of Ishmael and also the generations of Isaac. Then there is the incident relative to the birthright. So this is a remarkable chapter, and it covers a great deal of ground. This chapter includes the account of Abraham's life, but frankly, his story ended back in chapter 23. So we probably could have ended the Bible study on 23, but we do include the first 18 verses of 25. Maybe we'll see why. We see a little bit here, just some genealogy. When he sent the servant out to get the bride for Isaac, and so Abraham marries Keturah. Then again, Abraham took a wife, verse 1, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimram and Joksham and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shuah. Now, that's Genesis chapter 25, verses 1 and 2. Now he has quite a family. He had his biggest family after the death of Sarah. Somebody will raise the question. I thought that at the time of the birth of Isaac, Abraham was dead as far as his capability of bringing a child into the world. Granted, he was, but when God does something, he really does it. This is the reason I believe that anything God does bears his signature. Right here, we see that this man Abraham was not able to bring Isaac into the world, but he now brings in this great family of children. The interesting thing that we have before us here is the mention of Medan and Midian. The two other boys will have nations come from them also, but I can't identify them. I'm not interested in them because they do not cross our pathway in Scripture. But Midian does. We find uh, later that Moses will go down into the land of Midian and take a wife from there. Remember that the Midianites are in the line of Abraham, and so are the uh, Medanites. So we find here the fact that there are other sons of Abraham, but the Lord has said it is through Isaac that Abraham's seed is called, not through any of these other sons. It is not through Ishmael, nor through Midian, nor Medan. All of these were nomads of the desert. Chuck Smith has something to add here, if I might. Keturan, it means mother of us all in verse 1. And then in verse 2, the story is about Jesus Christ. It's not about these boys and uh, the descendants that Abraham had, other than Isaac, because Jesus is not a descendant of them. He is a descendant of Jesus Christ. History means his story. And so we are looking for his story, Jesus Christ's story, in history, or else we're not looking at history. So that's why that we don't see these people ever again. And so both of them kind of skip down to verse 5, and that ends that section, by the way. And so let's go on to the next section, which is section verses 5 through 18. And so we, like I said, we skip down to verse 5, and we'll see. Let me make sure I don't skip anything. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. And so Chuck Smith wants to point out that Isaac line will lead to Jesus at this point. This is the boy we're looking for. This is the one we're going to follow. We're going to follow Isaac because his line leads to Jesus, and that's all that we are concerned about. And that's why that Abraham gave everything that he had to Isaac, and unto the sons of the concubines. They're not even wives at this point. It says that in verse 1 that she's a wife, but in verse 6, she's a concubine, which Abraham had. Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 175. And so let's see, 6. And Abraham gave up the ghost and died in an old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And Chuck Smith does have something to say about verse 8. His spirit moved out, is what this means. Whenever he gave up the ghost, his spirit moved out. You know, a tent gets old and ripped and does not keep out the rain, and it is no more use. In Luke chapter 16, we find Abraham in Hades, comforting Lazarus and the rich man talking to him. Jesus descends and preaches to the captives. He opened the prison door and released them from captivity. When we die, we move into a new house, a building of God, not made with hands. We are not going to make 175 years, maybe not even 75 years here on this earth. Chuck Smith, I looked up and he died at age 86. You know, a tent does not have conveniences of a house. And so we're looking to enjoy a house that we leave this tabernacle, this tent that we live in. It's a temporary dwelling, but we're going to have a permanent home in heaven, a dwelling place for our spirit. And his son Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, and the son of Zophar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. Again, Chuck Smith says that Isaac and Ishmael put aside their differences to bury their father here. And I think that's a commendable thing on Ishmael's part. And so we do see them here together at the burial of Abraham. Then in verse 10, the field which Abraham purchased of the son of Heth, there was Abraham buried, and Isaac his wife. Genesis chapter 25, verses 5 through 10. Ishmael comes for the funeral because, after all, Abraham is his father. So Isaac and Ishmael together bury Abraham. When Isaac goes down to live at the place where he first met Rebekah, in verse 11, it says, and it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahoi Roy. Genesis chapter 25 and verse 11. In verses 12 through 18, we have the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. The list of them is given here. I call to your attention again the fact that the Holy Spirit used this method in the book of Genesis. The rejected line is given first and then set aside and not mentioned anymore. Then the line that is leading to Christ is given and followed. So it is after the line of Ishmael is given that we come to the line of Isaac. And both Chuck Smith and J. Vernon McGee skip that because it's kind of irrelevant. And they both point out basically the same thing, that you have the line of the firstborn and then the line of the secondborn, which will carry, or the youngest, which carries the uh, the the heir, Jesus' seed. And so we see that there. And so that ends this section. Now we're going to continue on to section verses 19 through 26. Now, as far as our study on Friday nights is concerned, we have wrapped that up. But uh, now, if you'll follow with me for a few more minutes, maybe 15, 20 more minutes, we'll finish up this chapter. And the next section is verses 19 through 26. We see Esau and Jacob, verse 19. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac in Genesis chapter 25 and verse 19. This is the line we are going to follow. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, is the way the first chapter of Matthew begins. Each of these men had sons, had other sons, as we have seen. Abraham quite a few sons, but the genealogy of those sons is not followed. It is the genealogy of Isaac that is followed. You can forget Ishmael and Midian and Medan and all the rest. They will cross paths with the descendants of Isaac time and again, but we will not follow their line. And Chuck Smith does have something to add here. He says, now we come to the one that is important. We will follow him, and that is Isaac. And so in verse 20 it says, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian, and Padon Aram, the sister of Laban and the Syrian. Now, it's interesting that basically what men did back then, they had to wait until they were 40 to start their life, basically. They would apprentice with somebody from the time they were 20. They would start their apprenticeship, as we see with Jeremiah. They would start their apprenticeship when they were 20, and they would conclude their apprenticeship whenever they were 40 and be out on their own. And that's whenever that they would then start looking for a wife. So in kind of a way, he raised the wife and the children at the same time. He was quite a bit older. That's why that we don't see Joseph after Jesus is whenever he appears on the scene in his 30s, is because probably Joseph has well, he's deceased by that period of time. And that's the bad part about it, is usually the fathers are die long before the mothers in the Old Testament, if you'll notice that as well. And verse 21, and Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Genesis chapter 25, verse 20 through 21. It is interesting that Rebecca, like Sarah, was barren. And if you remember, Rachel was too. But Isaac pled with God on her behalf, and now she is pregnant with twins. It's almost like this day and time. Whenever women they go on birth control whenever they get married, and then they can't get pregnant when they came off of it because their cycle's messed up. It's almost like that there was something wrong with the women back then that they couldn't bear children. They were barren for many years. So Chuck Smith says this is they're miracle babies. They're answers to prayer. They're I'm sure there are a lot of women out there that are struggling with this right now. That yeah, a lot of people think of Sarah. We were watching this series on Angel. It's called Stones, and the one of the stones was Sarah. Sarah went to this woman that was having trouble. Uh, she couldn't have a child, and she ministered unto her in this series as a telling her what she went through and her experiences. But it is not only Sarah; it is Rebecca and Rachel. We see this with the mother of Samson, the mother of Samuel. We see this with the mother of John the Baptist. Again and again in the Bible, we see this over and over again. So if you're having trouble with having children as a wife, as a woman, you're not alone in the Bible. There's many stories that you can read that will help, that hopefully will help you to to be able to understand uh, God's plan for why that you have not been able to have a child yet. And so, with that in mind, we we want to continue on with our reading. And so, verse 22, and the children struggled together within her, and she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. Genesis chapter 25 and verse 22. The struggle of these two boys, which began before their birth, represents the struggle which still goes on in the world today. There is a struggle between light and darkness, between good and evil, between the spirit and the flesh. Every child of God knows something of the struggle which Paul sets before us in the 7th chapter of Romans. Rebecca didn't understand the struggle which was going on within her, and she went to the Lord with the question, why am I thus? So uh, Jay Vernon and uh, Chuck Smith kind of have the same idea here, is that there's a picture here of a man who hates good and a man who loves goodness and wants, uh, he wishes that he could be good. Verse 22, Chuck Smith says the babies are fighting, and continues after they're born. You know, how much consciousness does a baby have in the womb? Chuck Smith asked, or the first year. If you think about it, uh, they seem content. They seem happy. They can get upset. Uh, they can uh, feelings can be expressed in that first year. But we don't remember those feelings. So why wouldn't we say that those feelings could have been in the womb? Just because you don't does not remember those emotions that first year, or in the womb, doesn't mean you didn't have them in the womb. They could have been going at it in the womb, a regular knockdown, drag out fight in her womb, and that's what she was experiencing. Can you imagine? It's like two cats in a sack at each other. Is what she is maybe experiencing with them. we've probably seen cartoons of, they're going all over the place even when they're fighting outside the sack. Guy, uh, one little guy, he grabs the heel of the other one during the birth, and the fighting still goes on to this day. They are still fighting over dominance in that land. And so, and then verse 23, and the Lord said unto her, two generations are in thy womb, two nations, I'm sorry, are in thy womb, and the two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Genesis chapter 25 and verse 23. God makes the statement to her that the elder shall serve the younger. She should have believed it, and her younger son should have believed it. It's almost like um, God favors the under privileged, the underdog, the younger child, and He wants to see the younger child. You see that time and time again as we go through the Old Testament. You have, um, Isaac, and then you have uh, Jacob, and then you have um, Joseph, and so we see this time and time again where the youngest is God seems to favor because of circumstances, or I don't know what. Uh, let's see what Chuck Smith says. Chuck Smith says, "Is this fair?" Based on God's, this is based upon God's foreknowledge. God chose, the Edomite nation. The last king was Herod, and they fought. They all up until that time they were continuously fighting the Jews. They were antagonistic when the children came through their land into the promised land. You remember they hired Baal to put a curse upon the children of Israel, and Baal said, "Well, I can't. God won't let me." And his hatred for then you see Esau's hatred for spiritual things. God chose him, um, chose who the lineage of Christ would come out of. Therefore, and so we're going to see that here in a little bit. Make sure that I'm not messing up again. And so, verse 24, it says, "And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called him Esau." So the name Esau means red or earth colored, because he is born first and he is considered the elder, but the later it is to serve the younger. Remember, I told you about the diversity of or the genetic diversity among them. That's why that they can marry second cousins in this case, is because of the genetic diversity. Here we have a dark red, red man that's hairy, and uh, Esau and his brothers not like that. So let's read verse 26. "And after that came out his brother out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 60 years old when she bare them." Genesis chapter 25 and verse 26. 6. Rebecca, or Isaac and Rebecca, have been married for about 20 years before the children were born. The older one was Esau, and they call him Red, if you please. Jacob took hold of Esau's heel, so they called him Jacob, meaning the uh, usurper, because he was trying to become the elder or to take his place. But God had already promised that to him. And so if I go over here, Chuck Smith, he wants to point out that Jacob is really is interpreted hill catcher, which we later, as Jay Vernon says here, um, it's really supplanter, uh, or um, how does he put it? Usurper. And so that's the idea here. He was actually named Hill Catcher because he caught his heel of his brother whenever he was being born. And so that concludes that section. Now we're going to move on to the next section, which is section verses 27 and 28. And so in verse 27, and the boys grew, and Esau was a, a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man and dwelt in tents. Genesis chapter 25 and verse 27. Now we will look at these two boys as they grow up in this home. Here they are twins, but no two boys were ever more different than these two. They did not struggle. They not only struggle They not only struggled in the womb, but they are against each other from here on out. They have absolutely different viewpoints, different philosophies in life. Their thinking is different and their attitudes are different. At the beginning, I must confess Esau is more attractive than Jacob, but we learn that one can can't always judge by the outward sign. We must judge by what takes place on the inside. We learn that in this particular case, the boys grew. This fellow Esau was a cunning hunter, the outdoor boy, the athletic type. He is the one who should uh, we would call the all American boy today. He went in for sports, he went in for everything that was physical, but he had no understanding or capacity or desire for spiritual things. He was only interested in that which was physical. He represents the flesh. Jacob was a plain man. I think that you can make of that anything you want to. He lived indoors. He was uh, a mama's boy and was tied to her apron string. You will notice uh, that he did what she told him to do. Jacob is really a mama's boy, and so uh, Chuck Smith here points out that plain in the is the in the Hebrew it's the word tam, tam, and it means perfect or complete. And so God does not put him down, and we should not put him down. Who am I to put you down or judge you? Uh, you're my You're not my servant, you're God's servant, and he will judge you. And so he points that out. We often give Jacob a bad rep and bad name because his name means supplanter, but it means hill catcher. And so trickster, shyster, we often think of him in those terms, but maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was plain because he was ordinary, boring. He wasn't a wild man like Esau out rebelling against God, living uh, uncivilized and like an animal. As his hair denotes, maybe is what maybe we're looking at here. And this boy Esau is Papa's boy, boy. In verse 28, and Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Genesis 25 and verse 28. Here is the problem in the home. You feel that under these circumstances, they are going to have trouble, and they are. When one parent is partial to one child and the other parent is partial to the other child, you have trouble. That is exactly what took place here. Isaac loved him because he ate of his venison. Esau went out hunting, and he always got something when he went out hunting. I know of one time he didn't. He brought home the venison. Isaac liked that, and he liked this outdoor type of boy. Rebecca loved Jacob because he was a mama's boy. As I have said before, at this juncture, the boy Esau is much more attractive than Jacob. He seems to be more a wholesome boy. The boy Jacob is cunning. He tries to be clever. The fact is of the matter is that he doesn't mind stooping to do things that are absolutely wrong, and God will deal with him for this. The interesting thing is that although Esau was very attractive on the outside, down underneath he really had no capacity for God whatsoever. If ever there was a man in the world, he is that man. He is just a physical man, and that is all. I've heard him described a man's man, a hunter. That is all that he lived for. Down underneath in Jacob, there was a desire for the things that are spiritual. It took God a long time to rub off all the debris that was on top and to remove all the coverings in order to get down to where the spiritual desire was. But he finally did it. Before we are through with our study on Jacob, and his story goes almost all the way through the book of Genesis. We will see that he was God's man all along, although he didn't demonstrate it until late in life. Now we are told of an incident which took place in the home. You can well understand that the uh, partiality shown by both father and mother would cause difficulty and conflict. It could not be called a happy home. So, as we look at Chuck Smith just points out in verse 28, that venison is no reason to love someone. And that's a sad statement that we have here in the Bible. That concludes that section. Now we're going to move on to section verses 29 through 32. Give me a second. I should say stay put, because I usually do this and people like jump off the channel. So, verses 29 through 32, verse 29. And Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me, I pray thee, with some of your red pottage, for I am faint." Therefore was his name called Edom. He Edom. He ate him. No, it's Edom. Sorry, couldn't resist. And Jacob said, "Sell me this day thy birthright." And Esau said, "Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me?" Genesis chapter 25, verse 29 through 32. This incident reveals the nature of both these men. Esau came from the field. He had been outdoors and was very tired. He came in from hunting and didn't kill anything. So there's one time he didn't kill anything. He was not starved to death, as some would imply. No one would have been uh, brought up in the home of Abraham would starve to death. There would always be something for him to eat. The thing was that there was nothing prepared right at that moment, but this pottage, this stew, which Jacob had made. Jacob was the indoor boy. Eventually, he was a good chef. Evidently, he was a good chef. Feed me, I pray thee, with the same red. Notice in the King James Version that the word pottage is in italics, meaning that the word has been supplied by the translators. For I am faint, therefore was his name called Edom. Edom means red or uh, earthly, just as Esau does. This man asked for some of the stew, and Jacob saw his chance. Took a he is the trickster and the traitor, and he wanted the birthright. He said, "Sell me this day thy birthright." Let's stop and look for a minute at the value of the birthright and what it means. It means that the one who had it was the head of the house. It also means that the one who had it was the priest of the family. In this particular family, it means that the one who had it would be the one who would be in line that would lead to Christ. Do you think that Esau had valued it at all? Jacob knew that he didn't. He attached no importance to it, and he didn't want to be the priest of the family. In fact, that's the last thing that he wanted to be. In our day, sometimes when a Christian is asked to do something for the cause of Christ, he replies, "Oh, I'm not a preacher. I can't do that." There are too many folks today who do not want to do that which is spiritual. They don't even want to give the impression that they are interested in spiritual things. That was Esau. He didn't want to give that impression. If anyone would have called him deacon or preacher, it would have been have insulted him. He didn't want the birthright. He didn't care about being in the line that led to Christ. No one would have cared less about being in that line. Jacob sees this and he says to him, "I'll tell you what I'll do. If you'll give me your birthright, I'll give you a bowl of stew." Esau was very happy with the bargain. He said, "I'll be very happy to do it. What profit is the birthright to me? What do I care about the birthright? I'd rather have a bowl of stew." That is the value which he attached to spiritual things. Let us remember that Jacob also was wrong in what he did. God had promised the elder shall serve the younger. The birthright is coming to Jacob in God's own time. Jacob can't wait, so he reaches out to take that which God has promised him. He takes it in a clever, tricky fashion. He should have waited for God to give it to him. This man operated on the principle that he would do what he could for himself. He thought that as long as he could help himself, there was no reason to look to God to perform it. He felt thoroughly capable of taking care of his own business. At the beginning, he really did rather well as far as the world would measure him. But there came a day when God sent this man off to college, and Uncle Laban was the president of the college. It was known as the College of Hard Knocks, and Jacob was going to learn a few things in the College of Hard Knocks. But here, he is still operating on the principle that he is clever enough to get what is coming to him. Now, Chuck Smith has some things to add here in verse 30, which was, "And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, uh, uh, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom." The venison, Edom, the Edomites come from Esau, that is now Edom. And so we run into them again. As I said, the Edomites uh, were the ones that hired Baal and tried to trick the Jews into being cursed by God. So I guess that's about all Chuck has to say about that. And that concludes that section. Now let's go on to the last section, which is verses 33 through 30 and 34. And so, and Jacob, verse 33, and Jacob answered, swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Genesis chapter 25, verse 33 and 34. Don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are. Esau despised his birthright, is the important thing to see at this juncture. So Esau sat down and ate his stew. He had surrendered his birthright because it meant nothing to him. Nothing that was spiritual meant anything to him. Unfortunately, I'm afraid we have church members like that. They have no spiritual capacity and no understanding of spiritual truths. I told you they're as dead as a box of rocks. I believe that they're usually the treasurer, right? I believe that the mark, except for at our church, I love our treasurer. She is a wonderful lady. She's if she's watching, I love you, Diane. I believe that the mark of a true Christian is one whom the Spirit of God can teach and guide. It is as if a man today had a very valuable heirloom. Let's say an old family Bible, which had belonged to his grandfather. Another grandson wants it and offers to give him a quarter for it. So the owner says, give me that 25 cents because I was going to throw the old thing away anyway. That is exactly what Esau would have done. But Jacob is wrong also, and we'll see more of his cleverness and trickery in chapter 27. And so it may be a while before we get to chapter 27, but we'll get there eventually, God willing. Your creeks don't rise, I suppose. Let's look at these verses. Well, verse 34. He hated his birthright. He despised, which means he hated his birthright. He hated that. He hated God. He hated the spiritual. He hated these things, and we see that. We see that today. People that hate anybody who is spiritual. You can just tell them you're spiritual, and they hate you today. Well, this man hated them like they hated the Jews in the wilderness, and wanted to trick them so that God would curse them. You know, and it backfired on them. That's the way they were. They hated anything of God and anything spiritual. And there's people like that today. They just hate you because that you have any spirituality in you, because it makes their flesh be like a neon sign. I'm doing this in the flesh. I'm not doing it in the spirit, and so they hate you because uh, you're pointing. It makes it points out that they have no spiritual depth in them, so they hate the spirit because they only know how to do things in the flesh. They don't know how to do things in the spirit. They, they try to do things based upon what they have learned, thus far. I don't know. I've seen and heard some interesting things. People trying to do things spiritual, and it's scary. Uh, how they bring in the flesh and try to, it's make their attractiveness and that sort of thing. But that concludes that section or that chapter 25, and so we completed the lesson. And I do want to bring some attention to the channel. We're still at 958 subscribers today, as we were last night. We are at 753,400 views on the channel. I guess we've come up. What is that? 1,000, 1,600 views since yesterday. Still at 14,400 likes. Thank you, Laronda, for the thumbs up and the like. As I as I tell you every night, I'm sure that's my wife that did that. But if you, because she's watching, I'm sure. And so whenever I get through watching something on YouTube, I will give it a thumbs up to denote that I've seen the entire thing. And so it helps me to keep track of the numbers, sort of, between the subscribers and the views. How many, you guys have viewed. That's about almost 800 views each for each subscriber. Then the likes, you've watched completely, maybe I don't know what that would be like. Um, I can't do the math. 14, 14 things completely, and then but comments. There's 672 comments on the channel currently. We haven't had any comments for days, so make comments, ask questions. That's what I'm here for. Ask questions. I love questions so that I can answer, even if they're stupid questions. I've had some doozies, and so, but I will address it as if you're a bot. I'll tell you if you're a bot just trying to stir up trouble. But if that's the case, if you're just trolling and you don't have any subscribers or no content, and you're just trying to stir up trouble on YouTube, I'm going to tell you that's what you're doing. But I still will answer your question and make a point out of what you asked. And so I encourage you to do that. Not only will I take up the question, I'll answer it word that you ask it, but I'll also take it up on the next Waycast. Then the shares, there's 10,300 shares on the channel. So again, we have, that's 10, 10 shares per subscriber. I'd like to get that up a little bit. That means you've shared it with all your family. But I've went through my contact list. I've because it's getting out the word of God. If you want to get out the word of God some other way, do like Terry Warren and create your own content and share it that way. But if you don't want to create content, then share my content. It's getting out the word of God. That's all we're doing. You can help me get out the word of God by sharing it. I've went through all my contacts. We're on Facebook as Tony Ball. We're on Snapchat, Threads, uh, um, True Social, and Rumble as the Waycast. You can join us there. And then we have also, uh, 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 so uh, I have started through my contacts on Facebook. And of course, I do share every time somebody, I've got a new friend on Snapchat, I send them Against All Odds. I think it's a great evangelistic tool. Against All Odds, Jesus. And so I use that as the primary thing I share, or either I'll share a link to all the different um, books of the Bible that we have. Then we have 5,500 views for the week. So we're getting back down to about like we were before um, the election last year. We were running about 4,500 views a week. At one time, we were up to 55,000 views a week, and then we dropped. And then more recently, we were up. We were in the 20,000 views per week, and so that that is kind of interesting there. So uh, Philip is sending me snaps while I'm doing this on Snapchat. Okay, Philip. I wanted to see if he sent me a screenshot where he's watching the live feed, but maybe he's one of the people watching it. But anyway, I do want to point out you've seen my mugs around here. I think you can see that. Yeah, you can see the one over there as well. There's one behind me here somewhere that has a Christ Recovery Ministry. Let me tell you about Christ Recovery Ministry. I created this nonprofit. Can't pass up the water. I started this nonprofit to start a rehab. My original business plan is for a rehab for women where that they can bring their children, possibly even families, is what you might be looking at after seeing No Vacancy, the movie. I kind of like that idea where each motel room has a different family in it, and they're in recovery, or they're homeless, or you're trying to, that sort of, the my bylaws are where I can handle homeless people, I can handle addicts, I can handle any abuse victims of domestic violence, men or women, or whatever the case may be. And so that's what it's modeled after, the Bethany House in Somerset, Kentucky. After talking to Don Whitehead there uh, for for extended periods of time, I kind of got to know how it works around there, and so that's kind of what I modeled it on. I thought that the kids were the emphasis, because I had a men's home. God said, open up a men's home. You know how to do it. Go do it. And I did it for a year, and then I opened up a sober living home, man and a women's sober living home, for a year. Well, I guess I should say Christ Recovery Ministry did. And so um, I have the experience. I have the experience of starting a uh, over my head homeless shelter. I was on the board when we did the bylaws. That's how I knew how to do the bylaws to start Christ Recovery Ministry. So I have that multiple experiences with rehabs, but I have a desire to buy a motel. If anybody knows of a motel in uh, in the area here, Madison, Rockcastle, uh, this area of Kentucky, let me know, so that that's my next. That I feel like my next step. Even though with Over My Head, we actually started meeting first. Uh, Meeting. Uh, uh, we had maybe 300 people show up for our first meeting. It was kind of amazing. It was crazy. Uh, Everybody was so interested in starting a homeless shelter in Somerset. And so that's Christ Recovery Ministry. It's P.O. Box 336, Berea, Kentucky 40403. My phone number, I suggest you text me rather than call me, 859-339-7633. And then the email address is hoseltony@yahoo.com. And so uh, we those are the ways that you can contact us if you want to opine, uh, uh, as uh, O'Reilly says. Name and town, right? Name and town. No, it'll be fine if you want to remain anonymous, or something of that nature as well. So anyway, so you have plenty of ways to contact me, ask questions, make comments, and those kind of things. Probably if you have a lengthy, you probably want to do an email or some other form. If you want to write a letter, if you're in jail, I guess you can't probably see this in jail, but you're welcome to opine. And so with that, we do want to conclude tonight, and the this will conclude our study for precepts upon precepts for Debbie for Friday night. Hopefully, tomorrow night we will decide what we're going to study. Hopefully, me doing chapter 24 will encourage them to want to do the next study on Isaac and precepts upon precepts. So we will see. And with that, I say
good night, until we meet again. Adios, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, till then. And though it's always sweet sorrow to part,
you'll know you'll always remain in my heart. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. Here's a wish and a prayer, and every dream comes true. And now till we meet again. Adios, au revoir, Wiedersehen. Good night. And with that, I want to say, you are truly loved. And don't ever forget that. And I want to say good night.
Songs and fashions through the years. We hope we brought you